So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews. We'll discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Scott Ellam, who's CEO and founder at XCE Connecting Excellence Group. Scott, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. If you'd like to introduce yourself, your businesses, what you do, how you help people, that would be amazing.
Of course, thank you for having me, Chris. So I'm the CEO and founder of XCE Connecting Excellence Group. We recently listed on the UK Aquis Exchange, and we've recently cross-listed on the US OTC QB Exchange. So we're a public executive recruitment platform, and
Yeah,
our flagship operating business is a company that I founded in 2014 called Spencer Riley.
yeah,
Now, Spencer Riley places senior level candidates, so director level, partner level, managing director level, chief executive officer level candidates across a number of different industries, across a number of different regions. So we work within professional services. We place senior people with the likes of PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, work in business advisory and consulting, and we place with some of the world's most recognizable consulting firms, recently
well,
placing US managing directors and US partners with those businesses. And then we work in logistics. So we've had UPS as a client, recognizable ones, but there's thousands of logistics firms around
yeah,
the world. Construction, engineering, and AI intelligence data solutions businesses. So 70% of our revenue comes from the USA, Europe, and the Middle East. But we
well,
are based in Leeds. Our office is in Leeds. And we work on the best time zone around the world, which is Yorkshire. But the difference with this business and our PLC status, and the reason I took the business public recently, is in 2021, I established what you would call a novel or innovative balance sheet strategy. So we began using a Bitcoin balance sheet in 2021, which simply meant that we allocated all reserve cash
yeah,
and any surplus cash from 2021 until 2025 into Bitcoin. So we
interesting.
went to the IPO with just under 10 Bitcoin on the balance sheet, no debt on the balance sheet, and 120% return on the balance sheet. So we have the operating business growing at plus 30% compound annual
Yeah,
growth rate for 4 years straight. We're allocating the cash into Bitcoin, and a Bitcoin balance sheet had gone up 120% over that period of time. But if you look back, 2021 was a peak in that asset class that drew down quite heavily and then went across and then back up. And we were
yeah,
just buying price agnostically every day or every week throughout that period,
yeah,
which is what I believe is the best long-term strategy, in my opinion, for British businesses, whether private, whether public, whatever stage we're at, as a 4, 8, 12, ideally forever balance sheet long-term reserve asset. Now, that's my opinion. I have a high conviction in it. I've got 10 years background in that. But
yes,
I'm running an international executive recruitment company. So when we took it public, my intent was to build a capital markets team for the active balance sheet side of a business,
yeah,
and then build a platform for growth for the operating executive recruitment side of a business.
yeah,
Combining both with a PLC status now allows the XCE Connecting Excellence Group to bring on talented, high-performing executive recruiters who are ultimately the revenue drivers in the business.
yeah,
So a high performer might do £300,000, £500,000 a year revenue, and allow them to earn the industry-leading basic salaries, industry-leading commission scheme. There's a lot of competition on those aspects in our industry, but we've now got the additional element of they will also be able to receive performance-based share options in a listed group that has an active balance sheet and is transparent in how many Bitcoin it holds, what percentage of a
fascinating.
share is made up of that balance sheet asset,
Yeah,
and that we're mandated to increase the Bitcoin per share within that business over the long term. So very different strategy, and something that's, I suppose, out of the 200 businesses globally who categorize themselves as Bitcoin treasury companies, I believe we're the first one that is saying, look, we have a traditional business that's engineered to grow as a result of a
yes.
balance sheet strategy. So that's the summary, Chris. And I,
Fabulous.
I, I was kind of pleased when we went into this call that you'd because me and you had been introduced to jump on this call, that you'd kindly sort of said, I'll keep an open mind for the conversation and won't necessarily go into too much detail. So I'm sure you probably have some questions on that.
I've got so many questions. It's fabulous. You did say before we started this is going to be interesting, and that's an understatement. My first question is, what was where did this concept first come from? What it's fascinating. Where did you pick this concept up from? Is it something you thought from yourself? Had you researched that in other businesses? Where did the idea come from?
Well, the executive recruitment company I started in 2014. So I was probably, I'm guessing here, and I'm giving away my age, I think I was 24.
Right.
And I was really fortunate in the first 10 years of my career, or the first 5 years of my career, I managed to gain a lot of experience that I didn't know I needed and didn't know I had to gain. So I set the business up probably at a stage where I was quite quickly having to learn how to run a business, learn how to manage people, learn how to lead, learn how to train people, and had assumed that I would, have all them skills before I set a business up in 2014. So the first 4 years of building my business, before I started the business, before I came to university and all that kind of thing, I always had a real instinct that the money that we're using in society is going down in value and the asset prices are going up in value. So when I grew up at younger years, I remember 13 years old, 12 years old, maybe, just identifying that everybody in the town I lived in the northwest of England, in order to build wealth over a long period of time, were borrowing money from banks to buy property, to rent that property out, and the value of that property was going up.
Yeah.
And the loan that they'd taken was being serviced by people in the property as a simple, like the probably the most mainstream path to long-term storing wealth was buying property with borrowed money. And when I came to set up my own business, I quickly got into a situation over the first 2 to 4 years where I was thinking, I'm building up a cash reserve in a limited company, just in case the business doesn't generate the revenue I expect it to over a 3 or 6 month period, to be able to service the staff's wages and make sure business was protected long term. And over that period of time, I'm thinking, how do I allocate this cash so it stops going down in value? And if you have, I can't remember the exact figures on this, but if you have 100 grand or £1 million in the bank from 2020 onwards, regardless of whether you've got it in a 3 or 5% savings account, which would be high, you're still losing purchasing power over a long time, because the rate of inflation is, if you measured on CPI, 8% maybe. But the reality of the situation is, if you're trying to buy property, gold, or something, a classic car or energy, it's going up at 10% a year. So your 100 grand buys you the same as what 90 grand would have bought you a year later, and buys the same as what 81 grand would have bought you 2 years later. So I was watching the cash reserve just decrease in purchasing power. And I went through that cycle between 2016 and 2020, where I discovered Bitcoin personally in 2016. And somebody explained to me, and I was coming at it from an angle of, I'll trust what they say and then I'll verify whether it's true.
Brilliant.
And they said to me, okay, there's only 21 million of them that will ever be in existence. Now, when you think about that, a hard cap of the money of 21 million in existence is the first time in the history of humankind where you've had an asset class that can't be increased regardless of whether the demand increases. So if the demand for gold increases, they mine more gold. If the demand for land increases, Abu Dhabi will just build some more land into the sea. And if the demand for diamonds increases, they will dig more diamonds out of the ground. Whereas if the demand for this asset class increases, Bitcoin, you can't change the supply schedule. The supply schedule is set until 2140, after which all of them will be in existence. It's kind of, it doesn't matter how far down you dig. Like gold, it's stuck in the ground, but Bitcoin, it's stuck in the future in that supply schedule. So was like, right, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about in that much depth at the time. And then the other elements of it were it's unconfiscatable. So it's the first time there's ever been an asset class where somebody can't take it from someone else. And I kind of mean that through violence, if you like. So if you're holding gold in a safe and someone breaks into the safe, they can steal the gold.
Yeah.
If they steal your car, they've stole your car. And if they hack your bank account and the money goes from your bank account, you're insured and they can print some more money and put it back in your bank account. With Bitcoin, if you've got the password in your head and you die, it's lost forever. And there's a wallet with 1 million Bitcoin in it. Satoshi's wallet, the person who invented Bitcoin, which is kind of the equivalent of inventing the internet sort of thing. He doesn't control it. He's not got no influence over it. But he has a wallet with 1 million coins that have not moved since that first year. And if the password's been destroyed, it'll never be removed. So first time there's been an unconfiscatable asset. And then the first time there's been an asset that can be transported anywhere in the world without any third party permission. So if you want to send your money from your bank from the UK to a better jurisdiction for tax purposes, you can't do it without the bank's permission and probably the government's permission. And if you want to move your house from one country to another, you can't do it. And I just thought, okay, so every person who wants to protect the wealth of the long term or short term. So if you wanted to move, if you think about the Ukraine war and you think about the Iran war right now, if you wanted to leave a country immediately with everything you own and all the value that you own, it's an asset that you can get on a plane with a USB in your pocket and move 1 million, 10 million, $100 million worth of money from one country to another without permission. So there was 3 elements that stood out to me between 2016 and 2020 where I thought this is a fascinating asset class, money, network.
Yes.
And it was hard to find good information. But as I was going through that journey from 16 to 20, the business my personal life, I was thinking, right, this is a great solution for long term. And the reality is you're learning over those years that with Bitcoin, if you study it for 10 hours, you're skeptical. It's volatile. Could it be hacked? Could it be stolen? If you study it for 100 hours, you get to the point where you're thinking, okay, this is going to go up in value. And you think I'll buy low and I'll sell high. But once you've studied it for maybe 1,000 hours, you tend to come to a conclusion that, okay, this fixes a lot of society's issues. It fixes a lot of issues for individuals, for companies, for nation states. And you get into the weeds of it where you like, how do you mine more Bitcoin? Well, you use energy and you're incentivized to use a colossal amount of energy that costs very little. So it incentivizes renewable energy and it incentivizes countries like Africa with dams and huge gigawatt potential in a dam in the middle of Africa that's nowhere near a city. They can now plug it into the Bitcoin network, mine Bitcoin, and then send it over the internet anywhere they want in exchange for dollars. You're like, right, okay, there's a lot of once you've cracked that, like, okay, I'm really studying this now.
Yes.
You become quite, okay, I get it, and you can't really go back from that point. So in my personal life, I'm going through that journey, but I'm running a business that's growing, and we move into Leeds city centre in 2020. And the first thing that happened on the first day was the COVID lockdowns, about 5 days later. And I had a cash reserve in the business, and every prime minister, president around the world, each country around the world, effectively said, in order to delay the economic shock and in order to prevent a Lehman Brothers style collapse where people lose their houses, we're going to increase the money supply, print digital money, and we're going to give it to you for free. And we want you to stay at home and do nothing and produce nothing in that time. So as soon as that decision was made, having been an accidental student of monetary history from 2016 to 2020, increasing the money supply is the ultimate cause of inflation. It's hard to argue that there's any other cause than doubling the money supply means the prices are artificially increased. So as soon as every nation around the world agreed to double the money supply, I thought, okay, this is going to drive Bitcoin adoption. So 2020, I saw a public limited company in the USA, Michael Saylor, CEO, strategy, allocate to Bitcoin in 2020. And I thought, well, I'm a private company. Why am I constantly thinking about my cash reserve, constantly thinking about strengthening the balance sheet over the long term, and not practicing what I'm preaching privately with friends and family?
Yes.
So I decided in October 2021 to allocate to a Bitcoin balance sheet. Now, the challenge with Bitcoin is the short-term volatility. And
Yep.
I'd had 4 years buying personally and had a high enough level of conviction to say, this strategy starts now and we buy price agnostically for 4 years. Then we review where we are.
Yep, great.
And from 2021 to 2025, there was an 80% drawdown in the price. Right. Our revenues were going up 30%, which meant we could buy more Bitcoin per pound than we could at the start of the process. So when we came to the IPO, because we bought all the way down and all the way back up, we're at 120% gain at IPO, holding about 10 Bitcoin. But I would not recommend that to somebody who's not got the levels of conviction I had, because I was willing to go through that kind of stress and go through that kind of pressure from external parties and management accountants asking me why I'm buying an asset that's going down in value. But I was fortunate that I was 100% shareholder. I could make the decision. I could sit with the strategy over that time, and that the team in the executive recruitment company delivered exceptionally well over that period as well. So that's kind of trying to summarize where the idea to use a Bitcoin balance sheet came from. But two key points in the last 100 years of history for me are the things that I always sort of mention is sound money tends to create a sounder society. So if you're confident that your money is going to be worth more in the future than it is today, you're less likely to spend it on poor things, bad decisions.
Interesting.
And you're less likely to waste it, and you're more likely to save it. And in the UK, people are driven by spending on fancy cars, nice holidays, and the worst result of it is the amount of gambling that goes on in the UK, because ultimately that's a symptom of knowing that your money is going down in value next year and the year after and the year after, so you have no incentive to save it. And if you do want to save it, then there's a massive gap between being able to actually make it productive and work for you. And that gap's usually getting on the property ladder for most people.
Yes.
As in, if you can't save up that deposit for the house, then if you're a long way away from that and you can't see that happening in the next year, then what's the point in saving the £500 this month? So, and it's the same from a business perspective of what's the point in saving a large balance sheet of cash if you know it's going to go down in value? So let's acquire another business and let's just race to acquire one, or let's take on some more debt and let's do something else. And they're looking for ways to just spend the money as fast as you can. If you've got a money that you're confident going up in value over the long term, then you're less incentivized to waste it. And the two moments over the last 100 years for me are Bretton Woods in 1944 after World War II, where it was established a gold exchange standard for the dollar, and it was $35 for 1 ounce of gold. And that stayed between 1944 and 1971. And if you look back and people say it was great in those years from the 50s to the 70s, it was because the money was sound and backed by gold. And that failed in 1971 because of human decision making. And Richard Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard because they were printing suspicious. The countries were suspicious they were printing more dollars than they owned in gold. So that temporary removal of the gold standard in 1971 never came back, and I don't believe ever will. Because the trust has been broken. And since 1971 to today, the government debts around the world have just gone exponentially up, and the inflation has just meant that asset prices have just gone up and up and up, but wages have stayed not that too dissimilar. And that's meant that there's been a disproportionate leveling up for the richer people in society who own the assets, and those who are on wages who are trapped in that inflation trap.
Yeah.
So there's a lot gone on before I made the decision in 2021 to establish a Bitcoin balance sheet. And then over that 5-year period coming up to 2025 was where I thought, okay, we can be really active with this. We have an opportunity to build a business that can use the capital markets and the Bitcoin balance sheet to increase the size of a balance sheet through equity raising, we've done some XCE Bitcoin denominated convertible bonds, and also drive the operational growth of the executive recruitment company by saying, if you want to join this business, you're going to have your performance-based share options linked to the operational growth you deliver, linked to the capital markets team's expertise and ability to increase the size of the balance sheet, the Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and in my opinion, what will be the best performing asset over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, and has been the best performing asset over the last 10 years as well. So that's your energy you put into this business is locked into performance-based share options that are locked into a long-term treasury strategy.
Nice. I mean, absolutely fascinating. Thank you for, I guess, a really good explanation of why Bitcoin is a good asset class, because I'll be perfectly frank, I didn't understand that depth of anywhere near that depth at all. So I get that because and as you say, and I'm very familiar with property investment and the property investment model, and it is, one of the beauties of property in general, certainly in the UK, is we're not making any more land, so it is an asset that will appreciate over value, irrespective of our ability to manage it. We don't have to be experts in property for property to go up in value. But I get that. I totally get your point. But this is the same thing. We've got a limited availability over time. Therefore, it's only going to go one way over time. Fluctuations, etc. If you're buying for the long term, Warren Buffett's key strategy is buy for the long term, not the short term.
The best investors are dead, as Warren Buffett would say, I think.
Say again, sorry.
I think Warren Buffett says the best investors are dead.
Yes.
But
fascinating.
Every business has to decide what to do with the balance sheet. Historically speaking, businesses have been operating businesses or balance sheet businesses. We're combining both. And I had thought long and hard about what we could do with the balance sheet from 2016 to 2020. For me, property is the route a lot of businesses go. But with property, you have time managing it. You have external parties managing it. You have legal fees, 100%. Solicitors' fees. It can burn down. It can flood. The lift might need changing.
I completely agree.
Ultimately, for me, we're a service-based people business. And the assets to our business are the people in the business who generate the revenue. We need something on the balance sheet that's an asset. And if it was property and we needed cash in the next 3 months, then a remortgage is a painful process to go through and not quick. So you'd have to borrow against it. Or the other option where you couldn't do this is you have to sell a little bit of it, and you can't sell a little bit of property. So you can't divide it up and you can't transport it. So that's why we came to that asset class. And that's why I think last year, as we were building towards the IPO, we had such a incredible interest from people who were business in Yorkshire of our size wouldn't usually get. So when I decided to implement this model and commit to going towards an IPO, I had to start building a board. So the board is weighted towards the Bitcoin balance sheet side of a business experience. And the executive recruitment side of a business, we've just took on a chief performance and growth officer who's taken businesses from 3 people to 72 people, managed 120 offices and satellite sites worldwide. But on the Bitcoin balance sheet side of a business, to get to the capital markets, I reached out to Richard Byworth, who launched the largest hedge fund in Switzerland in the last decade. And that hedge fund was Bitcoin denominated and holds 5,000 Bitcoin. So as a global expert in this space, he was the first person I reached out to. He's on board as a board advisor. And we have VJ Selvum, who is the ex-head of governance at Goldman Sachs and was literally on calls with Ben Bernanke after the Lehman Brothers collapse, organising the refinancing for banks and making sure that the economy recovered from there. So he's seen monetary debasement at the coalface in his role at Goldman Sachs. And that's what brought him into being obsessed with gold, first of all, and then moved on to Bitcoin. And he now... he reports into the two Winklevoss twins who allegedly invented Facebook. So he's on the board as a non-exec director. And then we have Sam Roberts from Cartwright Pension Trust. And not many people know this in the UK, but over the last couple of years in our industry, from a Bitcoin point of view, there was the first British pension fund allocation to Bitcoin. I think it was 3% allocation of the portfolio to Bitcoin, which was led by Sam Roberts, who's our chairman now. And then a CFO who's done main market listings. So I wanted to build a team that would allow us to access the capital markets, to raise equity, to buy more Bitcoin, design financial products like we have the world's first Bitcoin denominated bond. And we launched that at the start of this year with a bond program. And the investors that we got pre-IPO and in that bond, one of them is a guy called Adam Back, British background, who was the first person to receive an email from Satoshi Nakamoto back in 2009. And he's one of the world's most famous Bitcoin treasury companies, they call these types of companies. But Bitcoin business or Bitcoin treasury company investors. And he's launching a NASDAQ business in the next 4 to 8 weeks, I think he said recently. It's a big process launching a NASDAQ one, but it's worth 3.5 billion, holding 25,000 Bitcoin that him and friends have seeded it with. So we have a real opportunity in Yorkshire with this business to say, okay, we're able to access US and international investors. The balance sheet now, we went from 10 Bitcoin to 52 Bitcoin from December to today. We want to increase that to 100, to 300, to 500, to 1,000 Bitcoin and build a balance sheet that's very significant and able to propel and allow us to leverage the performance-based share options to attract talent to generate more revenue in the operating business, and then allow businesses to join the group and use us as a platform to bring their brand within our PLC status and benefit from the equity offerings we can do that are performance-based. And in the future, add in some more elements to drive operational growth. But both sides of the businesses are important and synergistic with one another. And the capital markets team and the investors side, they're focused on how much Bitcoin can we get on the balance sheet, and what will the use of that be in 10, 20, 30 years time, when that's used for credit and when that's used for collateral. And on the operating side, how can we change the dynamic of our industry and say, if you want to join us as an executive recruitment consultant, then you can earn equity in a PLC business directly related to your performance and the performance of the balance sheet. How can you join us if you're a recruitment owner who's struggling to access liquidity or an exit, because that is tough in this industry. And if you don't want to join us and you don't want your business to join our group, then here's how you can start considering this strategy yourself as a private business. And I would always say, match your allocation with your conviction. If you 5% believe I might be right, then maybe 5% a month for 12 months while you study it wouldn't be a bad idea. If you 1% believe I'm right, 1% is not a bad idea, but just getting used to it and studying it and being comfortable, because I think over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this will become quite common practice. Having spoken to Morgan Stanley and Citibank and TD Cohen and a lot of US investment banks over the last 2 weeks, this is becoming a real thing.
Yeah, well, you've certainly convinced me.
And there's only 21 million of them, Chris.
That's you did explain it really well for me as a very. I'm not even going to pretend that I have the knowledge here. That it's that I guess that is the limit. Anything with limited availability is going to go up in price, 100%. So it's Sorry, my mind's whirring, so it's not connected to my mouth at the moment.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine that it's 21 million when I say it, but for
Yeah,
someone like you, Chris, who's I don't know how many times you spoke about this subject before in the past,
very
or
little.
whether you've spoke to anyone about this subject before. It's easy for me to say that to you, but for you to really understand it takes a
Yes,
lot of time and actually using it yourself and saying, well, why,
I,
why,
hun-
why, what happens if, how
that,
come? And I think that's where everybody starts. And sadly, in the UK, our mainstream media tend to put people off starting
yeah,
that studying. And also, they don't really differentiate between fiat currency, which is pounds and dollars, can be increased in supply by our central bank
yes,
and by private banks,
yeah,
which dilutes the value of the pounds or dollars you're holding. Bitcoin, nobody can increase the supply, nobody can dilute it. But then in the UK, crypto often gets interchangeably used with the word Bitcoin. And
yes,
in crypto, it's probably worse than the British pound or the US dollar because anybody can start a new
yes,
crypto, and anybody who started the new crypto can market it and then can increase the supply or control the
right,
supply. And you're like, there's a huge difference between Bitcoin as a neutral asset class that's been adopted by BlackRock, being adopted by Morgan Stanley, being adopted by Citibank,
yeah,
and then crypto, which anyone can make a new coin that's not got any of the properties of Bitcoin and sell it as a similar
yeah,
thing that's got some utility. And it harms people to not
yeah,
have the education and the studying and people talking about it, which is partly one of the drivers why I decided to do this publicly, having done it anonymously for 4 years, because I really think that education in this space is tough to get through. And until someone stood there and said, "I've been there and I've done this, and this is what we're going to do," that people are skeptical of listening or skeptical of studying it for themselves.
yeah. No, I mean, you've answered two of the questions there. It was, yeah, because I am aware again in a very high level of ignorance, but there are so many cryptocurrencies out there. So like you
Mm.
say that isn't scarce, is
It's
it?
kind of no, it's kind of like being in the middle of the gold rush and saying, do you want to buy gold or do you want to buy tin foil? Because it can, it's got a use case to it. You can wrap stuff with it.
There's, there's
That's how I see it, and that's how I summarize it. And that's probably unfair to some areas that work within that space because you've got stable coins like USDT that allow you to transfer US dollars without permission and are backed by the US dollar. And there's lots of great use cases for the stable coin market. And also, there might be a couple of useful use cases, but I tend to lump them all in the same bracket as trying to sell tin foil in the middle of the gold rush.
there's a great one of the scenes in Blackadder, whichever one, the Elizabethan one, where he creates pure green. I've created pure green, and he's trying to make gold, and he creates pure green. It's like, oh yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting, and I think, and if I'm asking for a friend, I'm interested. Sorry, I'm waving that around. The listing part of this, is this about, you said going public, is this too publicized? What are the key reasons for, because and forget, I am going to ask this question, you didn't have to list as well, or is that absolutely inherent in the strategy?
Yeah, we floated with a significantly oversubscribed raise in December. So we
Right.
we capped the raise at 3.3 million. We've
Yeah.
since bought 2.7 million of Bitcoin and raised for Bitcoin from 10 Bitcoin to 52 Bitcoin. The reason we're public is twofold in the strategy, really. The first point is we can now, when we're worth more than the Bitcoin that we hold, which we design to logically be as a business that's been a profitable recruitment firm for 10
Yes.
years, now is able to accelerate scaling
Yeah.
and holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet with no debt. When we're worth more than the Bitcoin that we hold, so if we're worth 2 times more than the Bitcoin, if we're worth 5 times more than Bitcoin, if we're worth 10 times more than the Bitcoin, we measure it as a multiple of net asset value.
Yeah.
So if we're at a 3 times net asset value, if we're holding 5 million of Bitcoin and we're worth 15 million, we could sensibly raise another 3 million at that point,
Yeah.
buy more Bitcoin and move our net asset value from 5 million to 6, 7, 8 million. And then if the market cap moves from 15 million to 30 million, we could raise another 6 million and move the market cap up from 8 million to 14 million.
Yeah.
And then if we're worth 50 million, we can raise again. So in the simplest terms, it means we can access the UK, now the USA, and global capital markets to raise equity to strengthen and expand the balance sheet,
Yeah.
which in turn we wouldn't be able to do if we weren't a PLC. But in addition to that, as a PLC, we're then strengthening the offer to executive recruiters who are working for our direct competitors to say, if you want to join us, this is now the size of the balance sheet, and this is now the size of the operating business. The more people join our operating business and the more revenue the operating business generates, the more attractive the Bitcoin balance sheet side of a business becomes to investors at institutional and retail level who are looking for probably more volatile and ideally outperforming Bitcoin in a share that they can access in an ISA or a SIP or an institution that is mandated to buy equities that are based in Britain.
Nice. Yeah.
They can buy with British pounds and know that we've engineered our business to do more revenue the more the share price works in our favor, and the more the balance sheet's increasing, but also becomes more attractive to the investors the more the balance sheet increases and the more the revenue increases. And the more both of those elements perform, the more likely we are then to reach the active acquisition stage earlier, where we become more attractive for our competitors to join the group and add their revenue and their profit into this group to benefit from the same scalable structure. So that's why we went for PLC status. And I'm not expecting people to copy us fast. I think you have to have 4 years experience understanding the asset from a personal level before you're going to do it in a business.
Yeah.
Because leveling up from private to public, from a governance perspective and from a policy perspective and from a deep due diligence on where we're buying the asset from, how are we custodying the asset, how are we distributing the risk between board members of this business, board members of our partners, Cartwright Pension Trust, board members of the bank that's holding it. So I'm not expecting people to necessarily copy swiftly, but I think that the strategy will evolve and banks. I think Morgan Stanley or Citibank, certainly, when I was in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, meeting with clients, partners, investors, Citibank, who were speaking on stage at the event, I think they said they're going to roll out custody over the next year. But you can imagine that if you didn't have to do anything, Chris, and if your business had a balance sheet with 100 grand or £1 million sat on the balance sheet, if your bank, if Lloyds or Barclays had a button to say, move this into your Bitcoin account, and they were holding the keys and they were doing all the technical side, but people would be more inclined to say, okay, I'll put 10% into there. And if it goes up or down in the short term, that's okay. That's my long-term savings. So I think as you see that evolution come through, people start using it more, which obviously does tend to have a reflection on the price over the long term. But our PLC status in the meantime and into the future, and our purpose is to amplify the size of the balance sheet, the size of the revenue that we're doing. And I think if you look at the UK, you have more than £1 trillion worth of trapped capital in ISAs and SIPs. And, for our retail raise, we were several times oversubscribed from people who were buying on AJ Bell, on Hargreaves Lansdown, on Interactive Brokers, who really understand the asset. And really, are in this industry and we know what's happening, and they're like, right, I want to participate in that. But my job from this point forward is to educate not that marketplace only, but traditional businesses, traditional institutions, traditional investors on what we're designed to do and why they should consider studying Bitcoin.
Wowzers. That's well, you promised a very interesting conversation, and we only just started. That is all fascinating, Scott. I am going to do what I can suggest it, if you may, is Can we call this part one and then come back and do part two? Because that is the best explanation of why people should be investing in this asset class I've ever heard.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to come back
I,
and